So the Aztecs. I'm gonna show you a little bit about the map again. So anything you see in blue is the Aztecs. So one of the main, you can see that they're located in the Valley of Mexico, and this is Lake Texcoco right here, this little area right here, and that becomes important when the Aztecs found the city of Tenochtitlan, which we'll talk about in just a second. All right. So Aztecs, around the time of the Mayans' decline, the Aztecs began to rise. So they began as a farming tribe from northwest Mexico, and they ended up migrating to the south of Mexico in the 1100s. But when they migrated there, they found that a lot of other tribes had already taken all the good land. So they founded a city on a swampy island in the middle of Lake Texcoco, which they called Tenochtitlan. So they were great warriors as well, and they fought to control other towns around Lake Texcoco. You may wonder why they founded their city on an island in the middle of a lake, and it's because of a legend. So a war god told one of the Aztec tribe's leaders that when looking for a place to settle down, that they should look for an eagle perched on a cactus eating a snake. And it was there that they should settle and build a new capital. Well, when they went to when they were walking by Lake Texcoco, they looked out into the island, and that's where they saw the eagle on a cactus eating a snake. So that's why they founded their city there. So they fought to control other towns around Lake Texcoco, and they gained strength when they actually formed alliances with cities like Texcoco and Tlacopan. Eventually, this led to the Aztecs controlling 400 to 500 other city-states in the area, and at the height, they controlled around 5 million people. So they required their conquered people to pay a tribute. And when we say tribute or a tax, we mean feathers, food, crops, pottery, blankets, whatever you could afford to pay, whatever was part of your income is what you were expected to pay. And that refusal to pay tribute equaled destruction of your town. So if the town you lived in, if the chief said, all right, nobody pay your taxes, we're not going to deal with them anymore, they would come in with their very strong military, because remember, they were great warriors, and they would destroy the town. So they gained wealth through the tribute system, but they also gained wealth through trade as well. So a system of roads aided travel and merchants to buy and sell luxury goods. So a lot of times the merchants would act as spies for the Aztec emperor, and because they were going into places where the Aztec emperor wouldn't, they could report back any problems, any uprisings that they thought would come. So the glory of all that is the Aztec Empire is most clearly seen in the capital of Tenochtitlan. And this isn't in your notes. I left a blank space so that you can jot down some notes if you want to, maybe even label this picture. But the city covered 5 miles. So it was built on the island in the middle of the lake. It covered 5 miles. And it had a population of about 200,000, and which made it one of the largest cities in the world at that time. So if you can see here in the middle of the city, there's a compound that was basically the political and religious heart of the city, and it has a huge pyramid with 2 temples on top. So this is the pyramid, and then these are the 2 temples. So other temples, like government buildings and stuff like that, filled the rest of this area. Excuse me. One of the first Europeans to see Tenochtitlan said that the city seemed like an enchanted vision. So he couldn't really believe his eyes. You pretty much have a city floating on water here. there wasn't a lot of land available for farming right around the city because they were on water. So they built what is called chinampas, or floating gardens. So this is the chinampa pretty much on this diagram. And here's a little bit of a closer view of it. They would grow their corn, their beans, their squash here, and how they actually made these chinampas they would pile soil on top of rafts that were anchored to reeds in the water. So from these chinampas, farmers would load crops onto canoes and then float them down canals back into the markets. So if you can see here, this is the chinampa, and they would float the crops back down the canals into the market right here. The empire's biggest market was called Tlatelolco. I always butcher that. But it's kind of a smaller city just outside of Tenochtitlan. And so this market attracted like 60 or 80,000 people a day. These merchants would bring goods like cotton and pelts from exotic animals and rubber to trade. And since the Aztecs had no coins, they a lot of times used cacao beans or goose quills as their money. And vendors who kind of paid rent at the market would pay in corn to the Aztec emperor in order to support the army that protected the empire. Right. So, society and religion. Aztec society was strictly divided into different social classes. The king obviously is at the top of this class, but he was actually elected by a group of nobles. Below the king were the priests. So religious ceremonies in the Aztec society were particularly bloody, even more so than the Mayans. So sometimes they would sacrifice 20,000 victims in a year. And like the Mayans, they didn't really sacrifice their own people. They sacrificed slaves that were probably from different areas, or they sacrificed prisoners of war. So this meant that warriors were also a part of the second group that included the priests, because they were responsible for bringing slaves and prisoners of war back into the city for sacrifice. So that made them a pivotal part of the religious society. Merchants and artisans came next under the priests, and then the farmers. Farmers in Aztec society didn't own their own land. Basically, they had to pay too much in tribute to be able to buy their land on what was left over. But they could improve their lives by becoming warriors or studying at schools. Aztec boys and girls had to attend school until the age of 15, but some would continue if they thought that they had the ability to become a government official. But slaves actually suffered the most in Aztec society. So slaves were people who were captured in battle, or even people who couldn't pay their debts, and like I said earlier, would become victims of the sacrifices.